Okay. So welcome. Happy to have you here. I have a distinguished panel today. At least I think they're distinguished. I know you will too by the end of the day. Joining me is Ray Blanchette. Ray, who runs Ignite. We have Mike Hislop, who's involved in Corner Bakery and El Fornillo, who runs those. We have Mallet, who has her own company, PhaseNext Hospitality, and George Michel, the Big Chicken, runs Boston Chicken. You still go by Big Chicken, right? Yeah. Okay. So we were solicited to this panel and wanted to make fun of it. It'll not make fun of it, but have some fun with this. And so we're going to be open to any questions you guys might have, because these guys have a lot of experience and knowledge. But I thought I might kick it off with a little saying that some of us have used in the past to kind of think about the business. And let me start with, you know, the industry's changed greatly over my career and some of us up here, our careers. And we've moved from an industry that was fundamentally founded by leaders that, you know, got an idea, founded a business, and were able to grow that business in an industry that was full of growth. And they were the founders. Many of you know, the Ray Krocs of the world and Norm Brinkers of the world, so on and so forth. They were really the founders that many of us had the opportunity to work for and respect, and are clearly legendary leaders. Our generation came in really behind those founders and came in as professional managers trying to maintain the cultures and set the systems and processes up to really get scale in those businesses and grow those businesses. And so, and as we look forward, you know, the question might be asked, well, what's the next generation? What are the skills and things that will be necessary for future leaders to become legendary leaders? And so hopefully out of some of the things we talk about today, we'll get to that. But I want to start with a question that's kind of fun for me to think about, and that is the question about heroes, myths, and legends. Some of you may have heard that kind of dialogue before. It comes from a ways back of old school some of us have been part of. But it's an interesting way to think about this topic of legendary leaders. Who are the heroes? What are the myths, not necessarily in people, but the myths that maybe we've grown up with along the way? And who would be the champions that you would see? Heroes, myths, and legends, or legends. So let me just throw that out to, who wants to take that one first? Mike?
Yeah, I've been doing this for a little while, and probably over the last 30 years, I get to work with a lot of founders, entrepreneurs. I think they were all entrepreneurs. I was with Fridays in the early days, and I had Larry Cano, who was the founder of El Torito. I had a guy named Warren Simmons, who was the founder of Chevy's, and I had Larry Mandel, who was the founder of El Fornillo. So I get to work with a lot of founders. I have Corner Bakery, and Rich Melman was sitting here before me and spent some time with Rich, so been around a lot of founders over that period of time. And I mean, and you talk about heroes, I could probably zero in on any one of them, but probably one of the most amazing ones was when I left Fridays, and you were there, Ray was there in the early days with great systems. It was a place to work when we were a little bit younger. And I left there to go to El Torito, where El Torito was pretty successful on the West Coast, and Larry Cano had created that brand early on. And I went to join there, and outside of California, trying to grow Mexican food was a little bit difficult and not doing that well. So we thought, you know, you got a little Fridays background, go out and figure out what the hell's going on with the Mexican food in the Northeast, the Southeast, and the Midwest. And I said, all right, I'll go check it out. And there weren't a lot of systems in place. It was doing fantastic in California where people were eating Mexican food a lot, but went out there and had huge manpower issues, huge system issues, and we weren't making any money. We were losing money at a pretty good pace. I was there for probably about a year, and I think it might have gotten a little worse over time as I was trying to make some of the changes I was attempting to make. And I got a call that from his assistant that Kano was going to come out and visit me. I think I was in Florida at the time, and I'm saying, well, you know, I gave it a good shot, the best I could do. It might be a little bit worse, but you know what? I think in due time we'll get there. We've got the foundation together. And he comes out, so I go to sit down with him and thinking, this is it. You know, I'm about done. I was really even thinking about where do I go from here. And he sat me down, and he was a quiet guy, if you know Larry Cano. I mean, a lot of these founders are different, but he was real quiet, and he just says, Mike, I really appreciate what you've been doing out here. I know you've been traveling around, and I just want you to know I'm going to, you know, I think what you're doing is right, and you're going to be fine. And I had like, you got to be kidding me. You know, maybe really taking a good look at the results. So it was that kind of loyalty, and we did end up turning around that area over a period of time. But to have that kind of loyalty was amazing. And he was, to me, probably a hero, because I was still cutting my teeth, still learning, still trying, still making a lot of mistakes like you make in this business. But all of these guys were really a little bit different in themselves. But he gave me that opportunity, and a lot of people today still say to me, hey, thanks a lot for that opportunity. I got an opportunity when I'm ready to be gunned, and he ends up not only saying, hey, stick around, and here's a bonus. I got the bonus, I was stunned. You know, I sprinted to the bank because I thought he might have made a mistake, you know, just to put it in and don't touch it for a little while. But it was that kind of support that someone would show early in a career. One other one I might touch on for a second before we move over was Warren Simmons. And you might not know Warren Simmons, but he was really out there as an entrepreneur. A lot of you guys work for entrepreneurs. A lot of you think you're an entrepreneur, and a lot of us are in many, many ways. This guy was in a league of his own. If you don't know Warren, he did Pier 39. He built it from scratch. They said, no way in hell you can do this. He went to the mayor. The mayor said, you ever get this built, I'll come to your opening day in a bathing suit. Whether it was Diane Feinstein. I said, you know, and I remember him going through that saying, this guy's out of his mind, going through the hoops he had to go through. Well, he got Pier 39 built. He ended up founding Chevys. He knew I went in early in those El Torito days, and he would bug me once a week at like 6 in the morning and call and send letters. They didn't have email. He would send registered letters once a week saying, what the hell's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you want to come up here and lead this brand? But, you know, I ended up going up with Chevys when there were only a handful, and we were able to get that company moving in one direction. And to show you what kind of an entrepreneur he is, you know, I was saying, hey, we're gonna sell margaritas, we're gonna sell, you know, fajitas. We're gonna, you know, that's what you do in a brand like this. And we started to do cranberry margaritas. So we actually run out of cranberry sauce. Ocean Spray doesn't have any. He's ready to. He says, what do you mean? He just kept, no, they're out. They only make it in Massachusetts and Wisconsin. They're out. This guy, all right, by then he was sort of out of the day-to-day a little bit. Actually, we ended up selling Chevys to PepsiCo and made some pretty good money. Larry takes a good chunk of that money and goes to Chile to start a cranberry business. All right, called Cran Chili. So he spends $20 million, starts with the letters, starts with everything. You got to come to Chile, Mike. You wouldn't believe the opportunity down here. But, I mean, dealing with some of the entrepreneurs and the founders like you were talking about is amazing. But what you learn from them, that's an entrepreneur. By the way, it didn't really work that well. He's sending me pictures of trucks, you know, that are, you know, 3 stories tall, and this is what we're doing. He got a professor from Wisconsin. So when you're talking about some of the legends and the heroes that you have in this business, getting to work with some of the entrepreneurs like that is really amazing. And what you can learn from them and learn, you talk about risk takers, and then some of the things that we can do today where you're not being the kind of risk taker you can. So for me, being around that long and always being lucky enough to work with some of the entrepreneurs has been a gift. And trying to take everything you learn from them and trying to spread it out has been a challenge. But it's It's an amazing industry.
That's great, Mike. Let me shift gears and go to the myths. And I'll just throw out one that I have that might resonate with you guys, is I always thought every time there was a downturn in the economy, there'd be a hockey stick back up, because there was for many years. That's a myth. Not so. Anybody else have a myth from what they've seen in their careers?
Well, one myth I keep hearing about is more labor in the restaurants equals better service, which is not true.
Depends on whose perspective. I think one of mine is personal. That if you're really great and have a strong skill set for corporate execution, that you may not be a good entrepreneur. And I learned early in my career that you can't do generalizations. And based on how I look, you don't want people to make generalizations about you. So I spent a lot of time building my career on the corporate side and didn't really think that I would be able to do well on the entrepreneurial side. I'm process-driven, some say retentive, and so it was a myth for me, and I was worried about it, and it was a risk. Early on in my career, there was a guy named Louis Holwick who told me that I wasn't very good at risk-taking, and so by God, I was going to decide at the beginning of this recession, I was going to test the theory. Do you have skill set for one type of business to the exclusion of skill set for another type of business? And I want you to know that in this case, and in I think most cases, don't let generalizations stop what you want to do. I'm a very quiet, I used to be very shy. I started in ops as a restaurant manager, went into HR, back into general management. And I'm sitting on a panel at MUFSO, and now I'm a legend. And I'm not real sure how that happened. Or maybe it's a legend in my own mind, I don't know. But at the end of the day, guys, one of the reasons Wally asked about myths is we make assumptions, and sometimes it stops what we're doing. Don't let any myth stop what you decide to do.
I'll throw one out there that might get a rise out of folks as well. I mean, it's sort of topical and it's pissing me off. And that is that activist shareholders somehow benefit shareholders. I mean, I think what's going on in our industry right now, it's under assault. And us as leaders should really step back and kind of take a look at these very valuable companies that were built over decades that are being destroyed literally overnight with activist shareholders coming in and sort of forcing management to monetize what took decades to build under the guise that it's somehow in the shareholders' best interest. So I'll throw that out there to get people talking anyway.
Anybody want to comment on that? I like that one, Ray, because I have similar shared feelings on that. Anybody in the audience have any comments or questions about that one? Nobody taking it on?
Another myth may be, years ago when you were starting a new brand, and I was a part of a couple of the hot concepts, that, you know what, in order to get any funding, you got to be able to start your brand. It has to work here. It has to work over in another market. It's got to go work in another market before you're ever going to be able to get any of the funding that you need. And that is really, that's the way it was for a long period of time. You know, it's got to be successful here, start in San Fran, then go to LA, then you're going to have to go prove it can work in the Midwest in Chicago or something like that, that it has legs. Nowadays, you can see, and especially in the fast casual space that I'm buried in today, there are a number of great brands in private equity which usually wouldn't even come near you, all right, until you were able to do all of these things and have a certain bottom line, jumping on brands like Bruxy, like Sweet Greens, like Tender Greens, like, you know, Protein Bar, and all of these that are in their early stages that haven't moved out of their core markets, which is pretty exciting. But today, you know, you're able to start a brand and have it work in 3 to 4 locations, and not even that, and you're getting bigger companies, restaurant companies coming in and looking to finance you and be able to take you and use all of their expertise to growth. And the private equity guys are now saying, hey, I got to get into that arena. and I'm willing to ante up some pretty good cash, whether it's, you know, Catterton or, you know, some of the Brentwood or some of these other guys that are really jumping in. So that's sort of an exciting part, is that, you know, concentrate on it, build a great brand, stick to what makes a brand successful, and then you'll be able to maybe get a little bit more help, easier to finance if you want to grow your brand. Very different than when we were doing it even 10 years ago.
Yeah, there's still a fair amount of brands that are spread out further than they should based on that old theory.
That's right.
George, you had a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to just share with the audience who my hero is, because I think it's important for us as restaurant operators. My hero is Dominic Montesano. Dominic was my general manager when I was 17 years old. I started with A&W flipping burgers to pay my way through university, and after 2 months I was ready to quit, and Dominic showed up as my second GM. Today he still runs an A&W as a franchisee after 43 years. But if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I am today. So what I want to share with you is GMs in the restaurant business have a huge impact on the people that they have and they manage. And if it wasn't for Dominic, I would have never made it through life in the restaurant business.
I want to kind of piggyback off of that, because as I started thinking about heroes, I'm kind of the same way. For me, it's really all the folks in our industry that broke the cycle of poverty as a result of that restaurant job. And the numbers in the millions when you think about it. And I remember when we opened our first TGI Fridays in Russia. And, you know, at Fridays we had this tradition of doing recognition. And so we're out doing a bunch of recognition, and I recognized this one woman that was a server, and she was just, you know, exceptional, great attitude, and just really did a good job. And so we gave her a wow pen, I think it was. And she turns around, she takes off running, crying, you know, from this meeting. I was like, oh no. You know, I'm kind of a young director. I'm in a foreign country, and now I've just created some sort of international incident, right? So I take the translator and I'm like, find out what happened. What did I say that, you know, got her upset? And the translator translates back in kind of broken English. Well, she said, you don't talk to women like that in Russia. I was like, oh, God. I'm really up the creek now. And he goes, no. What she meant was that this job is the best thing that's ever happened to anybody in her family. And she meant it literally. And that it meant that they were literally going to break the cycle of poverty. And I've never, that woman, the look on her face has stayed with me for, it's been close to 20 years now. And I hope that it's affected my decision-making for the last 20 years, that we put people first. And remember, you know, when you have to close a restaurant, it's not a unit, it's not a number on a wall. It's full of single moms and first-generation immigrants, and it's a big deal when you have to close a restaurant to the people that you affect. So she's my hero.
That's a good one. That's a good one. So let me come back to the topic here of just when you look at the industry and you say, okay, we're going to, all of you on this stage are going to turn your jobs over someday to somebody that's coming up through the ranks now. And it's coming up the ranks in a different industry. We came up in a growth industry. The industry essentially is slow growth to virtually no growth. There are companies that are growing, but not the industry overall. So what do you think the difference in terms of to be able to manage today, you know, 4 generations under one roof, if you're, you know, managing a restaurant today, kind of things, what are different today for people to be able to break through and become a leader like the kind of positions you're in today? What would be different from what we experienced?
Well, I'm in a business that I own. So for me, it's really important to surround myself with people that have potential to grow. My hope is that I'm working in this business and I'm healthy until I'm, you know, 70 years old, which is probably not that far away. But I'm looking for someone who is as passionate about the execution of the business as I am. Now, when I was in a CEO slot in a big company, that may have not been a good way to think about it. But I'm allowed, because this is about me, my personal net worth, my vision, my passion for how I started a business. Very intentional strategy. And I have to keep looking for more than one person. And I don't look for someone that's going to do it the way I execute it, but someone that has a passion for getting it done in the way that I believe it needs to be done. And so it's not how, it's what. What are they really going to do? How do they look at the potential of this? You know, we don't have businesses any longer in corporate America and in our industry where if you work 3 years, you're going to get promoted to department head. And, you know, your goal is to be vice president. And, you know, someday you might be COO. Those jobs are getting tougher and tougher and fewer, and the tradition of those jobs is changing. And so what I continue to try to think about is, what does it look like to have 1, 2, or 3 people that are executing in our business that care about how it gets done? And I have to tell you that, you know, I've watched people that want to give up because they didn't get promoted last year. You know, the good old days of every year we'd sit down in a management review and everybody would kind of look for the white smoke and the dark smoke coming out of the room. Things just aren't the way they used to be with us. And you know, my perspective is this is about individual talent, people that work with value, because values are not quite as predictable as they used to be. It's just a matter of where society has evolved to. And so there's not one thing that makes a person successful. It's everything that a person is willing to put into a package and how they're willing to execute against the standard of the brand that the consumer is expecting. And I've got to find somebody. You know, everybody hears about family businesses. I look at my business that way. If I decided in 5 years that I wanted to only work 5 days a week instead of 6, who would it be? And I said that very intentionally because the generations behind us are not living to work, but it does take a tremendous commitment of effort and result, not just time. And so I think about all those things as I think about every GM we hire, every area manager we interview, every director of new department that we plan to bring on to grow our business.
George, I want to probe a little bit. You obviously, you were born in Jerusalem, right? Yes. And so you immigrated to this country. And how do you look at the age differences and you know, kind of the workforce today, the changes you've seen from, you know, being an immigrant into this country, what you viewed to a boomer perspective, and how as a leader today you see it? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, what's important is you got to embrace diversity, you know, because even when I go to our restaurants at Boston Market, I'm always checking employees' names, and you can always connect with them based on where they're from. And usually if there's a story about, I was in the Philippines, I was in Manila, or I was in Indonesia, or you know, people from Syria or Lebanon, you know, you connect with them by talking to them. And you know, I'm lucky that I speak 4 languages, so I can switch languages. And some of the staff are blown away when I switch to Arabic or I speak French with them, because that's how you connect with them. And it's a diverse workforce now that we have. And these individuals need to feel like they're part of the team and that they're connected with the team and with the values. So diversity is extremely important in today's world. And the second thing is, you know, for the future, it's all about marketing is taking a different role. It's not about just running ads on television now. It's all about social media. And your employees can impact your social awareness as well, because they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, and they impact your brand significantly as well.
Yeah, I love working with the younger generation, the millennials, maybe because I have 3 millennials. Seems like when I was growing up, I always worked for brands that I knew how to market to because it was marketing to yourself. But I work with, whether it's Corner Bakery today, where, you know, all of a sudden you're more of the elder statesman in the group, working with the younger teams there, or on boards with young millennials like Sweetgreens. And they have a passion, and they're still trying to learn the ways on what's going on. You know, a lot of things are changing with what, you know, George just said, with obviously IT, and, you know, that's going to continue to change. Legislation continues to change, but certain things don't change. And talking to some of the, whether it's a Pacific Catcher or Sweetgreens or Corner Bakery, is, you know, what really hasn't changed at all from 30 years ago is a great GM. That has never changed. All right, you want to be successful, get a great GM, all right, and make sure they have the passion. It is very different. I think it's more difficult to be a GM today than it was years ago, but getting someone that can connect with the community, get the employees to connect with the community, share our strength that we do at Corner Bakery is massive. Massive because our GMs and our managers love it, massive because our employees love it, and our guests love it. But today, you better have a great GM. They need to really connect with the community they're in and be able to understand how to really drive sales. You know, and it's sort of always been that way. A great GM, I talked to our guys today at Corner Bakery at Ilford, Iowa, and we think a good GM is worth $5 to $10 grand a week, and not moving them around and keeping them there and making sure, you know, that they have passion for the business. And you're trying to, you know, with the younger generation or with some of the millennials you're working in, you say, hey, we've got to, you know, obviously on a brand, it's got to have a, you know, great points of differentiation. You got to have a strong economic model. You have to have great management, but don't forget that GM is still the key to the success of a brand.
Right, would you pick up on, because I know what you guys also are very ingrained in share strength in the dine out. You've been past chairman of that. Talk to us a little bit about that from the employee perspective, because you guys do a pretty good job getting employees involved too.
Yeah, I think, you know, employee engagement, when you think about today's workforce and sort of what motivates them, how philanthropic they are naturally, right? This sort of speaks, I mean, we think at Ignite that if you make an employee feel better about themselves, that's what's going to ultimately make them feel better about their company, right? And so by enabling them to give back through their work, you know, I think it really does dramatically impact the employee value proposition. You can see the level of engagement. We do a couple events a year. In April, we do an event for Autism Speaks because it's very near to home for us. And then in September, we do No Kid Hungry and the Dine Out for No Kid Hungry. So the level of engagement of the employees during those months is obviously much higher. And you can see it, you can feel it's palpable. So you know, I think philanthropy has an important role in our industry in particular, but certainly with our younger workforce. And then as it relates to, you know, the question at hand, as you think, maybe for those in the room that are thinking or aspiring to the C-suite, I mean, my recommendation to the folks here is say yes. You know, say yes to every learning opportunity that comes your way. So when the boss asks you to go do something, think about that learning chasm that you now get to cross and keeping your growth line very steep throughout the course of the early part of your career, because what you can expect to have happen, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the one guarantee is that this industry will be more complex than it is today, right? Technology is a disruptor. It's clearly going to impact. And so when you get to that top job, it's going to be a much more complex job than the one that we have. And so crossing those learning chasms today, I think, is probably the most important thing that I can think of to help you get where you want to go.
Just piggyback on that for a second. No matter what your job is, when you're the leader of the business, and you might be a director or a VP or a CEO, when you're the leader in a piece of this business, you have to keep yourself in tune to what's going on with your consumer and your employee. And so it may not be our generation that grew up with Yelp or Twitter, but we have to be cognizant of what it is, and we have to find out how it impacts our business and the employees and the consumers in our business. And we have to put people around us, and you do too, that can help you form some core competency about executing against those things. You can't put your head in the sand and hope that things don't change.
Let me stay on the workforce a little bit issue. We're in an industry of high turnover. We always have been. It's kind of one of the myths for me was I kept thinking as an operator, you know, I could do a better job with the culture and the hiring and the training and everything I was doing to have better results in turnover and make more money for the company. And I did a speech a few years ago after I'd exited being the operator, and I said, Confessions of a Boomer CEO. And the confession was, I always thought I hired better people, I always thought I trained them better, so on and so forth, but was it that much better? So you guys all run great companies, you wouldn't be here. But when you look at our industry, the pressure we're feeling, even through periods of high unemployment, the pressure of hiring good people and holding on to them, what do you think the future lies in terms of, there some things out there that you're thinking about that we're going to be able to hold on to the workforce differently to do today? Because it's an aging workforce. It's still, you know, there's still people that come to us on their way someplace else. But we have people who work for us for a long time, too. Talk to me a little bit. Anybody would like to pick that up to talk about how you think about that for the future? We didn't rehearse this, by the way.
I think it's one word, it's culture. And, you know, I've been part of a lot of great cultures, you know, and you always want to be working for a brand that you're very proud of. I always wanted to be working for a brand that I thought was the best at what they did. And that made it very easy for me to stand up, as Roz is talking about, and lead the brand and just say, hey, you know, I think we are the best, and let's try to create that culture. And I think it's a recognition culture. I think it's what we just talked about, that, you know, if you're going to have a younger brand and you're having a lot of millennials coming into fast casual, then you have to be, you know, in tune with what they're doing. So when you see and you get behind something as a company and they're all excited about, you know, taking care of the guests, taking care of, you know, share our strength and, you know, the hunger issue. Believe me, they rally around it. They love to work for a company that cares about the community. So a lot of it is just purely, you know, the culture of recognition. And that's recognition sort of has to continue. There has to be, I was just talking to someone recently, I said, well, that's good, but you need continuity. That can't happen this month and then not happen next month. So there's got to be a way that you recognize your team on a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly basis and try to create that atmosphere, challenging and fun, you know, atmosphere to work in. We've been able to, you know, create that sort of cult-like following where people are very proud. We do surveys every year in our brands, as simple as something called Talk to Me, to make sure that we're still connected, to make sure that the general managers and managers are connected with their employees, that they're, you know, in tune with what's happening. That is so important to us. And then if it isn't happening and the employees are not on the same wavelength, then you need to go in there and make a difference. And we've been able to have turnover levels that are, you know, some of the lowest in the industry, obviously for management, but really for today, the key is the turnover at the hourly position. And we've had some, you know, pretty solid numbers. And I think a lot of that is just making sure you are communicating, making sure that you are recognizing, and we do it all the time. We have different area directors have different awards that they are expected to give out. They are expected to go in and recognize and make sure you have that kind of continuity, not just something that you're going to be doing every now and then because you think it's something good. It's got to be honestly part of that culture, and it starts at the top and it goes all the way down.
Yeah, we've really engaged our employees at Boston Market in the last 3.5 years, we've had about a 25% same restaurant comp sales increases. And it's all attributable to the fact that we got our employees fully engaged. So twice a year, we go out and do 26 meetings across the country, meet with our GMs in 26 meetings. Then in the afternoon, we meet with the hourly staff. And it's always about whether it's LTOs or new programs that we're launching, because we've learned that if you do a great job with your internal PR, then it's so much easier to do external PR. We launched ribs last year in April, and because we went out and got the employees engaged, we hit 17% of sales in ribs alone. And it was only because the employees got engaged, they went behind the program, and they made it successful. So always engage your people before you engage the customer.
Just one of the reasons why I think it's important, we've been doing some work at People Report and Black Box, and so we took a casual dining company. We looked at how they were doing against their competitors, not stack rank in their own system, but a stack rank against their competitors, the average in the marketplace they operated. And in one company, we found there was about a 4.9% difference in comp sales from the best 5 DMAs to the worst 5 DMAs against their competitors. So then we went in and said, well, what does it look like turnover? Because you know turnover is going to be higher, not okay. But it was about 20 points higher in employee and 10-point difference in management. And when you put the turnover calculators to that, it's real money. And then the last thing we did, we went in and said, are they hiring different in the best markets? And we found is that in the best markets, they were hiring 106% of the median in that marketplace. And in the worst, they were hiring 93.93. So I share that with you because this point is turnover cost, and does it make money? Yes, it does. It's an important part of it. And I think, you know, anybody that, it's easy to kind of leave it on the table and talk about soft, squishy stuff, but it's real money, and you guys are doing good stuff to work toward that.
Well, I think this is one of the areas where, especially in casual dining, we're going to have to, ultimately, we're going to have to unlever ourselves from being so labor intense. Because quite frankly, I just don't think that we can all execute at the level that these guys are obviously already executing. And I don't think we're generally very good. I know I'm terrible at hiring people. I don't know about y'all, but as soon as I sit across from somebody, I find something I like about them, and I want to hire them. And so I'm terrible. I am never the last interview, right? I always have to have somebody else interview people just to give me a sanity check. But I think when you look right now, what's kind of happening, whether you know, we have a lot of pressures out, you know, on our P&L. You got a lot of conversation today around minimum wage. You got a lot of conversation around the Affordable Care Act. And quite frankly, I think that our industry is walking a tightrope here, right? Because I don't as an industry want to take a position that could be perceived as being against the middle class, right? And I think when you come out and say, I'm against raising the minimum wage, your words can be thrown right back at you, right? And being the largest private employer in the country, that's an irresponsible position for us to take without some, you know, background, without some data to sort of support our initiative. So I think what we can expect is, you know, trying to keep minimum wage at bay in perpetuity is like trying to hold the ocean back with a broom. We are going to be unsuccessful at that. So we need to start thinking as leaders, how are we going to pay our workforce more of a wage and remain competitive without compromising the bottom line? There may be an unintended benefit there, right? That as you get a more professional workforce, you may find that people stay with you longer. Certainly that would be the theory, clearly, that you know, folks would stay longer, become more proficient. But I think as an industry, we've got sort of a bifurcated point of view as it relates to minimum wage, and we really need to get our act together.
You know, Ray, I appreciate you taking that on, because what it reminds me of a little bit is the no smoking. And we were all going to go out of business. And we were getting picked apart city by city, creating, winners and losers in terms of who had to deal with it. And finally, as it started to move into a national movement, I think started to make an even playing field for all restaurateurs. I think there may be a similar scenario created with minimum wages. There's some level that, we can, Raj, you may be able to speak to this better than any of us as a past chair of the NRA, but there is some reasonable amount that we may have to be willing to do that brings parity, so we're not having to fight it city by city as we're doing now. Raj, you got any? You want to take that one? You're past chair. You may.
Yeah, well, and I raise my hand once too often, and I'm working on a task force for the board of the National Restaurant Association around this issue. I think we have learned. Wally stated it very well. Remember the good old days when if we thought if our customers couldn't smoke in our bars, oh my God. Well, guess what? They can't smoke in any bars, and in Dallas they can smoke in parts of Dallas and not in the suburbs, but they're still coming to drink. Minimum wage is similar to that. Ray is absolutely right. There's no way for us as an industry to stand up with a camera in our faces and tell our employees that we think that we will never allow a minimum wage increase for two reasons. One, we can't stop that freight train. And two, it is a broader question than whether we go from $7.25 to $9.75 or $10.10 or $15. Those are all numbers that were thrown out over the last 18 months. It started with a microphone at the State of the Union at $9.75, and then it went to a senator who wanted $10.10, and then it went to the unions who started to inch it up. And I'm hoping that when we get to the federal question, the 15 is kind of what they call in politics the red meat number. You throw it out there knowing that you're not going to get it, and then we're going to end up somewhere else, hopefully more rational than $15. But the facts are, we are going to see wages increase. It's a part of what is going to happen in our society. And the federal wage is irrelevant at this stage since some 20 states are in the process or have in the last 2 to 3 years raised their state wage. And so the bottom is moving up. And what we have to try to focus on the federal level is to not let it get out of hand. But we also have to focus on what the truth is, that tips are real money, and that our business model will change drastically if the tipped wage goes from $213 to $707, which is what is in Harkin's bill, et cetera. So we have to break it apart and fight against the pieces that don't seem rational at all while not making absolute general statements. I spent 2012 as the chair of the National Restaurant Association and spoke in state after state after state. And the one thing that I had to be very careful of was I never stood up and said I thought that ACA was bad or good. What I said was I felt like everybody in the United States deserved access to health care. Roz personally believes that I can't afford to pay for all of it because I've looked at the numbers. But there's somewhere in the middle ground, and I think we have to attack each of those issues somewhere in a balanced middle ground. And we'll have to manage our labor. We're using something called Ziosk at Buffalo Wild Wings as a franchisee. And we have to look at what we do about labor and how to offset it.
Just, Ray, I'm going to tag back to kind of the perception of employees. We've done some webinars with our People Report members with some research that Snag-a-Job has done. And it was interesting research because it was, their world is the unit level employees, and so they did a major piece of research on it. And it was interesting the outcome of that. The research came is that they didn't think $15 an hour was all that reasonable either. They thought maybe $9 was probably more reasonable. And they didn't want it at the cost of losing somebody else on their team. So our employees, they do want change, some of them actively and some of them passively, But I thought that was interesting to get the research in front for really employees, because, you know, so much of what we do is as restaurateurs is, here's what we believe. But, you know, it's when you talk to the employees, and we don't get a chance to ask them very often that. It was a great piece of research. So let me switch topics a little bit. We've got franchising on the panel here, and Raj, you are a franchisee. And as I used to say as a franchisor, I loved all my franchisees, just some more than others. And Raj has Mike as a franchisor, so she loves some of her franchisors more than others. But Raj, so how is it being a franchisee? I mean, and you know, what's different about it other than you have your own personal wealth at risk?
Yeah. Well, I think I made the decision to franchise at the beginning of the recession when I left Caribou Coffee. And one of the pieces that was really big in my decision-making was that I didn't feel like I had a core competency in a couple of things that I needed to have to be a really big company CEO. And so I decided that I'm a good operator. I'm really pretty good at building a culture in a business. I'm a good strategist. And so I kind of went down that inventory of what am I good at and what can I easily build a team around. And I can execute a business pretty well. And as a franchisor in my past, I have a lot of respect for the standards that franchisors put together. And so I decided to franchise for several reasons, but one of them really was I could play to my core competencies and my skill set by becoming a franchisee and executing a brand well. And then I immediately jumped to a development strategy, which was in airports, et cetera. But another driving force for me was I get to work multiple brands. And that's a lot of fun for me. Really challenging, really complicated. Never do anything simple if you can do it complicated, because I like a challenge. And so I am a franchisee of Corner Bakery and Smashburger and Buffalo Wild Wings. I do this in military bases and airports. And I love it because I can focus on the business and I never have to argue about a marketing budget again. I have a marketing fee, and Mike and Gary take care of that, and it is what it is. But that was one of the things that I was really enticed, was to be able to focus on what I really love doing in the business.
Let's hear the other side of this.
Well, when I started at Corner Bakery, we didn't have any franchisees. So when you start from that level, I can just tell you that learning curve, and I had been in the business for a while, that learning curve was about as major and as intense as any that I've had in this industry. So it was great to be in the industry, to be going after that. But the biggest lesson learned there, and it was a very big lesson, is there's nothing more important for me in the position that I have today than to choose the right franchise partners, like Roz and like the 30 that we have, 30 plus that we have today. You know, Corner Bakery, we're looking to double the size of the company, and we will within the next few years. We're down to almost opening a cafe a week, and that's a lot, you know, but yet that's a number of franchisees each opening up one or two. But even the key beyond that is when you have a partner like Roz or some of the other partners that we have, is they have to have a great operating partner. You know, we've had some of the most great financial, Matt. They have all the money in the world. They don't have to worry about financing, but then don't have the operating partner that you need. When we go back with John, who heads it up now for us and our team, is we've got to make sure that they have a great operating partner, because, you know, a lot of the great brands are a little bit complicated. You need people that have been in the industry and really understand that. So franchising has been fantastic. You know, every time I probably sit in a meeting with Roz in the council, they remind me that the economic model needs to get better, and that's happened from day one. So I've been doing it for a long time. So one thing you need to have is a brand, like we said, that has great points of differentiation that absolutely drive guest frequency, but you have to have an economic model that works, you know, within the four walls, you know, as well as the build-out cost. And you got to have that great management team, both the financial backing as well as an operating partner, to really make it successful. But it's been one hell of a ride to get to where we are today. And the key, and for me, is obviously putting together a great senior management team at Corner Bakery to be able to support that kind of growth. But now, my number one, when we do Discovery Days, it's an intense day for me. All right, because, and Gary, who's our president, it's just, hey, we really have to get the right partners in here and then, you know, overly support them, especially with the first couple of cafes that they're going to build. But it has been a huge challenge, a lot of great learnings. And, you know, you talk about mentoring and things like that. Some of the best mentors I've had are the franchise partners. You know, and I've been doing it for a while, but I'm not a franchise expert by any means. The first couple, John Cutter, who had Friendly's background, the Rose Group out of Philadelphia, these people have been doing it for a long period of time. Huge learning curves going both ways. So you learn a ton from Roz, you learn a ton from everybody else. You just have to be really open to making sure that, hey, we're all in this together. We're developing these strategies together as we try to grow the brand, you know, throughout the country.
So Ray, you took over a brand that was all company owned, and I think I've heard you talk about this before. You had an advantage by not having franchise. You have franchise experience, obviously, in other brands, but talk to us about that in terms of how you view that yesterday and today.
Yeah, well, clearly, I mean, Ignite has been sort of built on turnarounds, right? That's our legacy, starting with Joe's Crab Shack. And I don't know that we would have been able to turn the business around at the rate that we turned it around with franchisees, because there's just too much collaboration, right, and cooperation, and you've got to get everybody on the same page. And you know, when you're in the trenches in a turnaround, I mean, you're building an airplane in the air. You got to make decisions in real time and sort of force alignment when alignment's not there. So it certainly, I don't know that it would have been impossible. It would have taken longer with franchisees, right? And I think so for systems that are stable, that are healthy, that are growing. I think those relationships are very powerful. You know, kind of back to what we talked about earlier, we're talking about breaking the cycle of poverty. I mean, the opportunity that franchising creates in the United States is incredible, right? The amount of small businesses that get formed as a result of franchising, I mean, it's a really powerful, it's a powerful enterprise. And so I'm pro-franchise, but we're not going to franchise Joe's anytime soon.
So, George, I want to come back to the workforce a little bit. You were telling me about some hiring you're doing of some special needs people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we've been looking at creating a program which we got a committee working on right now to start hiring disadvantaged disability people in our restaurants, because we feel that in the dining room, these people will do a tremendous job. They love to have routine work. They're the ones with the highest unemployment rate right now in the U.S., and we feel we can provide them the opportunities to come and work in our dining rooms, take care of our guests. And the other thing is we just opened our first Boston market on an Army base in Fort Bliss. We're opening the second one in Fort Meade next month. And we also going to be embarking on starting to hire veterans into our restaurants so that we can provide opportunities for them too.
That's great. All right, we're just between you and a cocktail, so any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
How do you incentivize or recognize your employees?
Well, I'll start. All our restaurants are company owned and operated, so we have budgets. We have flexible budgets as well based on sales going up and down, what kind of bottom line they should provide. We also have satisfaction measures, you know, customers that fill out a survey. And then we have objectives as well. So between those three programs, that's how we incent our GMs and our staff in our restaurants and make sure that they get the extra cash and they get some of the benefits from great experience. Then we also have a mystery shop program, and if the restaurant scores 100, then they get into a pool, and we pick 15 restaurants every month, and the staff that work that shift get $1,000 to split amongst themselves. So we try to engage hourlies and managers and not stop just at the manager's level.
Anybody else?
Well, I think that's pretty consistent. The only thing I would throw out there is make sure, if you compensate against it, make sure those are the results you actually want. Because as soon as you start compensating against it, you're going to get movement in that area. I mean, a lot of times you have like an internal satisfaction metric. This is the one I see get overused all the time, right? And so SMG or whatever, you know, outsourced company that you use to gather feedback from your guests, as soon as you start compensating your managers for that, you'll see the scores go through the roof. The actual performance in the restaurant's probably not moving commensurate with that. And so you're kind of getting what you're asking for, right? And so just be careful what you ask for would be the watch out there.
Yeah, we continue to bonus on top line, bottom line, and then again, the recognition is people still, when you have a newsletter that comes out each week, and you talk about the new openings, you talk about employees that have been around for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and making sure their picture's in there. They love that.
Yeah.
You know, they love that. And each area director having his own type of award to give, you know, to back up, you know, how you wow a guest, how you take care of a guest, legendary service. Each one of ours has, and there's a lot of different names, and there's a lot of different plaques or trophies that go out there, but people love that individual recognition that you need to do on a weekly and monthly basis in the store. So on top of just the normal bonus programs you have, that kind of culture I talked about earlier, I think is key to, you know, keeping people excited about what they're doing.
I have begun to get the answer from a couple, but Mike, you talked about it just there, began to. And you were talking about the importance of the general manager and in your operations as in all. One of the things that's been done in the past where we've seen some expansive growth of concepts was where general managers were allowed to put money up in the operation and then got a portion of the bottom line. And I don't know how much that is being utilized today. I think it's kind of gone away. Can anybody speak to that? I know two of you are not using that formula. Are either of the others, and do you have any comment to make on it?
We're too small as a franchisee at this stage to do it. Right now, it's all risk on the loans. So, you know, we don't have a program for that. I've been in big businesses in the past where we've used some of that. And again, it is about what you're trying to incent. And you tend to need to do it with sweat equity in order to get a general manager involved in that kind of program. It's fairly complicated. There are 2 or 3 big businesses still doing it, I think. Outback that's their legacy. But I don't know of a lot of others that are creating it at this stage.
And one thing we try to do and we really encourage is with our new franchisees is that the operating partner has equity within that system. We think it's a necessity. You know, have them, you know, I talk with Gary, I talk with our team, and you go into some of the locations and you say, geez, I just need someone to have that kind of ownership. You know, they got to have ownership, take ownership like you own this place. It's not a job, you know. So one thing we're trying to do is to make sure with our new franchisees and with the existing franchisees that the operating partners have a share of what's happened, equity, you know, however they want to do it. You know, make sure that they're incentivized to grow that business and be part of the community and build the relationships you need to be successful in those communities.
All right, I think it's cocktail time. I want to ask you to join me in thanking the panel for their time and their wisdom. I'll just close with a brief story. I was the fortunate guy that took over Fridays at one point in time, spent about 14 years. And when I went there, we had 135 restaurants in 2 countries. When I left, we had almost 855 countries, across $2 billion in sales. And I asked myself the question when I left, what did I do? What was I proud of? We made money for the shareholders, made some money myself, all of it good stuff. But I came to something that Ray touched on that I ought to share with you. When I look back at it in retrospect, I said, I had the opportunity to be involved in creating jobs and opportunities for people that they might have not ever known otherwise. And to me, that was one of the greatest joys of leadership and still is today. And those of you that lead organizations, it is not just the money. The money's important. The money has to be made for your shareholders. The money has to be made for yourself and your key people. But it is really about being able to create those jobs and opportunities. These guys have all done it very well. My hat's off to all of you. Thank you.